Welcome back to another set review. This time we're talking about ACA or what
Acad
is it? AC?
Arcanum Academia. Let me double check. Yeah, Arcanum
Oh,
Academy. Wait, is this misspelled on Instigator?
oh yeah, double A on it.
Uh,
Wait, triple A on it. It's good.
uh,
But Arcanum Academia.
is this like a spelling error or is this intentional?
I'd imagine it's a slight typo.
Okay, well,
Um,
good intro. Anyways,
but
let's actually talk about the set.
yeah, so this set is, at least from a reviewing point of view, maybe a bit like I found it a bit weird. Because the two kind of core mechanics, or wait, three core mechanics, I guess, are harmonize, which is what do you call it? Harmonize like linear or parasitic.
It's
Not sure
it's
how the
linear,
terms work there.
right? Because it
Yes,
triggers itself, but it's not parasitic because all of the harmonized cards have harmonize on them or
yeah.
harmonize themselves.
Well, not actually all of them, but most of them.
Yeah.
And then you have, in addition to Harmonize, which has that, you also have Fatigue, and a decent amount of cards in the set try to mitigate fatigue somehow. But that's not really, don't really care about that in Constructed. Um, so there's kind of a bit of a balance of, hey, you want to play a lot of fatigue cards because you want to play a lot of cards that balance out fatigue. And fatigue is a card that goes on top of your deck that is bad. So you want to be playing a bunch of fetch lands, but if you're only playing one or two fatigue cards, likely one, that's maybe not worth it to go out of way for. So it's a bit awkward. So there's a good amount of cards that are potentially worthwhile if you go all in for them. Like Harmonize, for example, there are at least a couple Harmonized combo decks that have been like popping up or been mentioned in like deck building.
Yeah, and I mean, Harmonize has been in two other sets so far, so maybe you can find something there.
Yeah, but I'm not super interested in talking about those kind of like very narrow combo applications too much. So, but just be known that there's a good amount of cards that aren't talked about here that potentially have constructed applications in very specific setups, perhaps
Yeah.
more than other sets have.
And then this set also has a third mechanic called Rouse, which I'm not sure if it's going to see any constructed play because it feels more like a limited mechanic. And it's a really weird
Uh,
mechanic to judge too, because
yeah,
like
so Rouse lets you turn non-creatures into creatures, or just buff up creatures. So there's a pretty some amount of motivation there in terms of constructible cards. We have like maybe non-creature permanents you want to die. Though most of those aren't super playable. What I think like there are a couple though with like Pyromancer's Knock, I think.
Pyromancer's
Uh,
Knack.
Whichever the one I read deal 2 damage, one of
Yeah,
these play deal 2 damage.
Pyromancer's Knack.
There we go.
I mean, I feel like rousing it isn't the best way to get into the yard, though.
Yeah, but that's just kind of one example. And those cards aren't necessarily like, I guess they're not too hard to find, but there's not a ton of constructed playable ones that come off the top of my head. But if there's a particularly good one, it's definitely possible that Rouse cards suddenly become really good. And there might be a Rouse card that we missed, and it has particular synergy with another card that isn't super constructed playable at the moment, but would be very constructed playable if you could turn it into a creature.
Yeah.
But enough about some mechanics. Let's just jump into the cards that are maybe more generally playable. If we have Elm Grove Performer.
Which is a harmonized card, but we don't care about the harmonize or synergy. We just care about the harmonize when ETBs because that's usually all you're triggering off of it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely likes having more harmonized cards, but yeah, you're playing it as a 2-mana 3/1 gain 3. And this isn't a terribly complex card. The main comparison point would be Whiterun Ordainer, which is a 2-mana 1/3 gain 4. Also in white. Any strong feelings about the comparison point between these two cards?
I feel like Whiterun Ordainers play better against burn, right? Because 4 life, and then it's 1/3, so it blocks the 2/2s that or 2/2 drops that burn likes to have.
Well, yeah. At the same time, like being able to actually kill burn is like nice. And especially if you like playing a more aggressive deck where you can put pressure on the life total, maybe the 3/1 stat line is a bit better.
Yeah.
Um,
Gain life and then start taking your opponent's life.
yeah, but really not much to say about this card. Just that it exists. It's a decent option.
Yeah, if you need a white 2 drop that gains you life against burn, but also can put on the pressure, then there you go.
Yeah, maybe it's a more interesting card if you're worried about being burned out by like Thunder Roads or something.
Is it? I mean, Whiterun Ordainer is also kind of doing the same thing.
Yeah, but the important thing is that you do need to like kill the Thunder Roads player.
Right.
So knocking down the life total, maybe making them spend a Thunder Road inopportunely, while also giving you a bit of a buffer against getting burned out by multiple Thunder Roads, making them get above that 18 life threshold. Might be a bit interesting.
And I mean, if you have any incidental harmonize in your deck, then suddenly you're gaining much more life. So there's also that synergy to look out for. But that applies for every harmonized card that's good on its own, right?
Yeah. So another 2-mana white 3/1 is Banishing Initiate. I suppose the comparison point here is much like Omgro's performance White Run Dana, Banishing Initiate is being compared to Confining Priest, where Confining Priest hits creatures Tower 4 or less, I believe.
Power 4 or less, and it's a 1/3 as opposed to a 3/1. So, exact same difference.
Yeah. Banishing Initiate does hit non-lands instead of creatures.
Right. Didn't notice
which
that.
is maybe particularly relevant if you're complaining about blue-green ramp, say. That's a deck that makes a lot of tokens, and this is a clean answer to, say, Primal Resurgence or Petal Scatterer's ETB token. Mainly the restriction is a bit harsh. Mana value 3 or greater is definitely not a trivial restriction.
I mean, it's basically a Thailand, right? Because Thailand hits stuff that's 2 or less, so like it hits the same targets that Thailand does.
Yeah, that's a good point. Kailan would be coming down 3. This does maybe have a stronger niche against tokens than like Kailan does. Kailan is also not as good against drops in general because comes down on turn 3.
Yeah, it's a 3-drop.
Also, Banishing Initiative, of course, can be killed by your opponent, which is definitely a downside.
I mean, so something funny you can do, since this thing, like, only sacks at end of turn, something funny you can do is, like, absolve the thing that's in exile, because why not?
Oh, that's a good point. Absolve stocks keep on going up.
Or you can, like, Tenuous Existence, the thing when it comes back.
Yeah.
Well, like, Tenuous Existence actually works really well with this, because the front side can exile something permanently, and then the back side, oh wait, never mind, that thing's in the graveyard, you can't flicker it anymore.
Yeah, there's some interesting applications with this and Flicker when any kind of instant speed effect, because it does only sacrifice at the beginning of your end step. So if you do need it to kill, like exile something with a higher CMC, then you can like Tenuous Existence it, and it comes back in on your end step, and it exiles it, and you have until your next end step to deal with it.
Tenuous Existence again?
Yeah, and you can Tenuous Existence it again if you so desire. And of course, in aggressive decks, this does always get you through combat. So yeah, you worry about an Infectious Ego or something, or I guess Profane would say it just exile straight up. But Infectious Ego, you can always attack through it, which is nice.
Well, I mean, you give them an extra trigger off Infectious Ego, but if you're desperate enough.
Yeah.
If you just have to win right there, I guess.
And also if you can somehow get this out at instant speed. It is, again, until you end step, not any end step. So if you're a Monument of the Fallen Man, then this will be a good thing to flash in at instant speed. Also, white 2-drop, so good toddy target. Gives you some versatility there.
Yeah. And also, it hits any non-land permanent, not just opponent stuff. So, like, you can technically use it as a really expensive flicker on your expensive non-land permanents, I guess.
Yeah, that is actually, like, decent utility. Mainly, there's not a ton of high mana value non-land permanents that you'll be playing that aren't like planeswalkers. And flickering planeswalkers with this seems kind of whatever.
I mean, if you have an ETB expensive creature like Ego or something, right?
Yeah, maybe. Like you can go like turn 2 or like turn 3 toddy, uptick, turn 4 Ego, downtick toddy, I guess.
Yeah.
Which is a line. But it definitely has application and a lot of kind of interesting things going on. Continuing the pattern of white 2-drops with potential utility somewhere, we have Compulsory Studies, which is just a pretty decent removal spell. It's a Journey to Nowhere that causes both players to draw a card.
Is that better than Journey to Nowhere? Or I guess Disassociate in MSEM, right? Because that's just a functional reprint.
Yeah. I'd imagine that this is probably better. At the very least, you can make the choice of whether it's better or not in your deck. Maybe this is better in like mono white or something along those lines, because mono white isn't known for having great card draw. But
yeah, I guess. I mean,
it's an option.
It puts you up on tempo, right? So like
yeah.
if you're playing an aggressive deck, you can more likely make use of the card before your opponent does.
Yeah, it does get you enchantment for, say, like Founding Hero or stuff like that.
Do you want to play
Which
this
is
in
really nice.
Oxbox? Like this is not the right. Oxbox isn't the right deck for this sort of card, right?
I mean, Xbox doesn't have like any draw, so you can definitely I think generally use the draw better than your opponent can.
Right.
Even if it's not like doesn't thematically fit. And there are like other decks that use Founding Hero. They're a bit slower than Xbox. Like any kind of Enchantress deck, maybe you want this.
Yeah, draw 2
Just
cards instead of drawing 1.
yeah, just because if you don't have also if you don't have Enchantress out, then well, you do need some way to filter towards an Enchantress. But it's definitely an option, and you can make the conscious choice. Next up we have another pretty interesting card in do you spell this?
Luminescent Featherettes. So
Yeah,
it's basically it has Converge, right? That's what it does.
yeah. So you pay some amount of colors, and it's going to give you that many 1/5s.
Yeah.
Which seems pretty reasonable. You play this on turn 2, get 2/1s. Pretty decently above rate of like a raise alarm or something.
Well, Raid's Alarm is instant. Like this is sorcery speed.
Yeah, but flying is a pretty big upside.
Yeah.
Also works pretty well with anthems in general. I mean, Verdict of the Council is a pretty good card. Also works with Chronicles of Kitsune.
Well, I mean, the flying's redundant then.
Yeah, that's true. But if you can get two, if you're playing like 3 colors, play Featherettes for 3, you still get 2 tokens. So does help give you or 2 tokens. Does give you a good amount of tokens to bash your opponent's face in with.
Yeah.
Also just generally has flying, so maybe not a potential choice for flyers as a deck if you're going into white. Does work against counter spells decently well with it being cast trigger.
I mean, does Flyers want 2/1/1 Flyers for 2? Because that's usually what's playing it for, right? Because Flyers really doesn't want to splash a third color.
Wait, which color is flyers playing already?
Blue.
Yeah, but on blue. It's saying it's saying that playing for 2 colors.
Yeah.
You always want to play this for 3. I think that for 2 it's fine. I mean, you're playing Nebula already, right? So
Right.
decent chance you'll have a third color just from that alone.
And I mean, it's an X spell in Flyers, so like if you go late, I guess you actually have a plan if you go late.
Yeah, if you do a couple Nebulas, it does get there. Definitely potentially a nasty card if you have some amount of synergy with it, some amount of anthems. Going back to the kind of decent utility card, we have Senior Warding, which is just generally a pretty nice card. Good utility.
Yeah, I guess you run this in your heroic decks, like whatever, if there is a heroic style deck, or I guess prowess. If you're splashing white into your prowess deck, then this one's probably a good card.
I mean, there is a couple of white-orientated prowess-esque cards. I'm blanking on the name, but the lifelink guy that grows when you play a cheat spell. Let me pull it up real quick. Hollowed Moon Sentinel is potentially nasty. Works very well with this because you can either cantrip or you can protect it a little bit.
Wait, what Sentinel?
Hollowed Moon Sentinel.
Yeah.
Also, like, worth a mention that it's a modal spell. There's a fair amount of modal spells in this set, so this works pretty well with the modal kind of game plan, because if your opponent's trying to couple your Nexus possibilities, then you give it pro instant sorceries, you draw a card, yay.
If your opponent's trying to kill you, then you gain 3 life and draw a card.
Yeah. And then it's pretty cheap if you want to try and copy it with Palison, 3 mana, turn into Divination. Not all that bad.
Worst case, you just cantrip with it.
Yeah. Moving on, we have, I think this is the only like harmonized combo card I'll mention. In Focus Apprentice, sacrifice a creature harmonize is definitely pretty attractive as combo weight.
Yeah, there's no once per turn limit. You can just sack however many creatures you want.
Yeah, so this works with like Ego Professor from this set. I believe there's a 2-mana card from an older set that germinates on harmonize.
Yeah.
Pip Chef, Harmony Germinate, so you can make a token and then stack it. And that gives you infinite sacrifice triggers and ETBs. Which is a combo.
It's a combo.
but I'm not going to dwell on it too much. So now we have a Planeswalker, Reheat Arcane Tutor. This was the card I was trying to find during the MSJ set review with Hoarding Crab, but does not have mill in it, so it's not super easy to find. So this is pretty reminiscent of the original Jace, the 3-mana base bone, where the +1 gets both players a card, the 0/0 gets only you a card. A bit modified, because you're going to get better card than the +1. It's only +1, so +2. And the 0 you can't isn't a -1, and it doesn't you can't use it immediately. But that kind of plays out maybe a bit similarly to original Jace.
Did original JC play and constructed? I mean, I wasn't around back then and didn't really pay that much attention to, or I didn't do that much research into that era of Magic.
Original Jace was really weird because you had the old Planeswalker rules.
Okay,
I was around with
before the Jason Mind Sculptor got printed.
I think it's lost some play. I think for the most part it was just going he enters -1/-1.
Okay, so it's like a really slow ancestral recall.
If that's the comparison you want to make, sure. I mean, it costs 3, but normally this does have a bit more utility. I mean, I was mentioning reference mill. This does mill each player 3.
Quote unquote mill, like it doesn't go into your yard.
Functionally mills 3. And additionally gives you some amount of options. So you can get the best of your top 3 cards. Your opponent's going to get the worst of your top
They're
of
probably
their
getting
top
a
3
land.
cards. Yeah, they get a land. You get an anticipate. And then you have the 0, which gives you nice utility as well. Starting 4 loyalty is it?
You take their best card.
Yep. Or maybe you play this on turn 3. You want your 4th land. You exile your win condition. Maybe you find your win condition later on. And this starting on 4 loyalty is like relatively nice. 4 is kind of the point where it's like if you play this on an empty board, there's a decent chance it will survive.
Right, this thing doesn't protect itself.
Yeah, but it doesn't protect itself. But hey, if you have Hoarding Crab, then the Hoarding Crab can protect it. And I mean, it's still, if you are playing this in mill, gaining 4 life isn't the worst thing. I mean, gaining 4 life, while your opponent 3, you anticipate, it's not too bad.
Yeah.
Maybe a more generically useful card that you don't need to sell as much is Irate Retribution, which is a instant speed Wrath.
It's a sweeper, not Wrath.
Sweeper is Wrath, yeah, same difference.
So it compares to Wave of Decay, right?
Yeah, so heavy black X-Spell that cleans up the board and gains you life. Sounds like Wave of Decay to me.
It's not even heavy X, it's just double black pips.
Yeah, that's true. But I think double black is like, I guess so. You probably want to play this X=2 at the very least.
Yeah.
So double black, 2 other. It's not that much of a commitment. Definitely less than Wave Decay, which is probably you want to be purple black at least. So this obviously has some like good use case because it is instant speed. You can self-trigger the flash with pain lands and whatnot.
Fetch lands.
Well, yeah, fetch land into Painland. You need to do.
No, I mean Wayfarer's Shrine.
Oh yeah, true. First thing the chalk fetches. I think I prefer Wave of Decay to this.
Really?
I think so, because if you are enabling the flash, it does cost you some amount of life. I mean, generally you want to be playing Wayfarer Shrine turn 1 or turn 2, just to set up your other lands for your check duels and your pain duels. So if you are like intentionally trying to set up flash that way, it's a bit awkward. And I think Wave Decay being a 4 mana cheaper is really darn nice, as well as not hitting your own stuff.
I mean, if you're playing a creatureless control deck, you don't really care, right, about hitting your own stuff.
Oh yeah, if you're playing creatureless control, maybe this takes up your wrap slot. But creatureless control also has like a lot more options to do with creatures and a lot more options for wraths. So maybe there's like a distinction there where this isn't actually compared to Wave Decay, where Wave Decay goes in decks that want to play creatures. But I don't think this replaces Wave Decay in a lot of places that you would play Wave Decay, just because you can play Wave Decay for like X=1, and that wrecks some like Prowess decks stay pretty hard.
Yeah. Well, this thing also hits Planeswalkers, so.
Yeah, that's fair. If you are struggling to deal with like is this even good at dealing with Planeswalkers? I guess in the late game it does, but a lot of Planeswalkers come down with a fair amount of loyalty.
Yeah, but like sometimes you just don't have another way to deal with Planeswalkers in your control deck, right?
Yeah.
Or actually,
I suppose that's
yeah. I mean,
a decent option.
And then also like you don't have to self-enable it. You can just let your opponent hit you and then play it.
Oh
end of
yeah.
turn because now they can't really play anything else, or they all get swept.
Yeah, though that does kind of slightly defeat the benefits of an instant speed sweeper.
Does it? I mean, like you get to play your sweeper after your opponent already played out their stuff, right?
Yeah, but it feels so like I can't imagine a scenario where that's not super telegraphed, right?
What if you're playing instant speed control deck?
Well, yeah, but why would you? If your opponent has a board that's worth sweeping, then you should be playing stuff in combat, right?
You don't always have like you said how much instant speed wrath cost, right? So like this is an instant speed wrath, so you have to pay something for it. In this case, it's your timing.
I guess. I mean, you can play this EOT and then untap and take our draw spell or something.
Yeah.
I don't know, seems fine. But I think Wave Decay is also very good if you can play it. Goes in more decks at least. This thing is probably more restricted to control decks. Because it is that double black initial cost is pretty expensive compared to like Violent Collapse even. We're getting
Right.
into the more generic sweepers options. Moving on to Stir the Pot. This was briefly mentioned with Cramming Student when we talked about MSJ. But I think it's probably best to look at this card just like in general, outside of Cramming Student kind of
Yeah.
stuff. That is a pretty narrow application of it. And I think what's really nice about this card is that a lot of cards it works nicely with. So a lot of the unearthed stuff, obviously. Also just kind of has nice self synergy with the card, where a lot of the unearthed decks want to be pretty fast. They do want to burn their opponent, so that first mode is good. The second mode is obviously the unearth, and the third mode is obviously not ideal, but all of the creatures you'd be reanimating, so Dust Lieutenant and Bloodjade Pocket, for example, immediately get rid of the fatigue. So Dust Lieutenant immediately loots it away on the following turn with the full forward token, the Omen, and Bloodjade Prophet just immediately draws you 3, so you can bin the fatigue. Does make it both effects slightly worse, but definitely helps minimize the damage the fatigue does to you.
Yeah. And I mean, instant speed and earth are pretty good. You can pull off some pretty nice tricks with instant speed and earth.
Yeah, definitely having access to instant speed when you would be like happy playing this at sorcery speed, I think, is definitely a nice thing. It's also probably worth mentioning that this works with Apprentice Necromancer. Is that the card? The sabotage.
Ambitious necromancer. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. So it does sabotage your opponent. With Ambitious Necromancer, you get 2 reanimation, or 2 unearths.
That sounds really nice. Well, the problem with unearthed deck is always getting cards into the yard before you start unearthing. Like if you're playing
Yeah,
an unearthed aggro deck, it's just kind of hard to get the engine rolling because if you try to run half of your deck, then your unearthed cards do nothing.
yeah, I do have to rely on stuff like Distant Thunder, the additional cost discard spell. But if you can get like rolling, maybe Still the Pot lets you play a bit more discard focused cards in general. Maybe it just kind of compacts your deck enough that that works out.
Yeah.
It seems like it could be pretty sweet. Moving on to red, we have Press Assistant, which is a red mana dork, kind of.
You have to attack with this thing in order to get mana, right? That's a
Yeah,
lot
so
worse than your usual mana dork.
yeah, so the kind of level 1 use case of the card is you play it turn 1, turn 2 you attack, and play a 3-drop. Much kind of like a mana dork in a way, except tapping is attacking. If you do want to kind of go a bit deeper, you can look at cards like Sweet Nothings, which taps it for free, which gives you some upside in addition to free casting Sweet Nothings for the double impulse draw. Then you can use the mana on the Sweet Nothings for a nice symbiotic. Wait, symbiotic?
Yeah.
Symbiotic's the word, right?
Yeah.
Symbiotic interaction there. There's also some lands that tap it. So Dragon Wall Gates and Koyami Shrine both tap untap creatures without costing mana. So turn 1 assistant, turn 2 Dragon Wall Gates as your land drop. You can immediately tap it, don't need to risk in combat, and then play a 3-drop. And while it does compete with Ragavan as a 1-drop that accelerates you, Ragavan doesn't play a 3-drop on turn 2, and this does. So definitely has some upside there. So how do you feel about 8 whack? With
8 whack. Does that even exist in MSEM?
what does now? Well, maybe you have 4 whack. Wait, 4 whack? What's the whack you've been referring to?
Dedicated bushwhacker.
I guess you have Bushwhacker, then you have the Burning Tree MSA, and there's another Burning Tree MSA like in Canon.
Well,
But
do you have 8 Bushwhackers in MSEM?
yeah, so Speed Reader, unlike Burning Tree MSA, makes double red. So unfortunately, dedicated Bushwhacker doesn't work with it, but you do have Jack, the legendary payoff, which is double red, which this does cast.
Oh, it is a Bushwhacker.
Yep. So if you want to live the dream and play 4 speed readers into a Jack, then you do that. Swing in for what, 14?
Yeah, sure.
Um, Also, if you're particularly combo minded, you can look at that harmony ability and be like, "Ooh, that's repeatable red mana that I can grab."
Is there like good 8 whack harmonized other harmonized cards?
Not an 8 whack, but if you're playing a dedicated combo deck, then maybe that's something that's interesting.
Sure.
We have Serene Initiate, which is off, I think, a first rouse card, and pretty darn efficient at doing it. 1/0/1 rouse 1 with a nice late game ability for go wide decks.
Yeah, so notably, this is a 1-mana card that gives you 2 creatures, and there's not a lot of those types of cards in MSEM. Like, the only one I can really think of is Overgrowth Guardian. So, like, you're probably just running it as Overgrowth Guardian's number 5 through 8, because Overgrowth Guardian is just better than that thing if you play early, because it doesn't expose your land. I mean, sometimes you just need the density of 1 mana make 2 creature cards.
Yeah, so normally this doesn't quite work with Critter's Companion, which is the main kind of payoff for creatures that make 2 creatures, because the Rouse taps the non-land or non-creature permanent that becomes a creature. But, I mean, still a 1-drop, so if you play it with Lore Spirit or something, still taps for crit, and the Lore Spirit still taps for the Critter's Companion. Also has that kind of occasional use case of Overgrowth Guardian, where you can put a +1/+1 counter on just a creature you control, which occasionally comes up in combat. And it does have that very nice late game ability with the Gillet, or unnerf Gillet for a turn.
Yeah, I mean, Creature Vomit usually ends up generating a bunch of excess mana in the late game, so that's something to put the mana towards.
Yeah, would need to make a new Creature Vomit deck. But this
Yeah.
is definitely a potentially strong tool, especially if you maybe have some random non-creature permanents lying around. Not sure exactly what that'd be, but maybe interesting to look into those types of things. So another card in the cycle with Irate Retribution is Studies Past, which is a Seasons Past riff.
I think Herdy just likes Seasons Past because they've made multiple riffs of Seasons Past before, right? There's also the other green card that does the Seasons Past like effect.
Yeah, and I believe Trot Vast was also a Season Past like.
Really? I never felt like it's okay, I guess, but like it didn't get used for Seasons Past.
Yeah, drawing from deck is a bit different from graveyard, but still have that mana value type thing. So this is pretty good card advantage tool. Admittedly, there's a bit of a weirdness that like your card advantage engine needs you to be getting hit to like use it at instant speed, but definitely an upside.
I mean, like, even if it doesn't have the instant speed mode, it's still good, right? Like, 5 mana returns 3 cards.
Yeah, it's definitely on rate. Once you get to like 4 or 5 mana. At 5, you're definitely like what? I don't remember the. I think at 5 you're still getting 2 in general. It's definitely pretty pushed in that regard, but you do need different mana values, so there's a restriction on that.
I mean, it's not too hard. Like, you get a land, you get your 2 mana removal spells, you get your like 3 mana whatever you played.
Yeah, but maybe if your graveyard is hit, for example, you don't necessarily have the all the choices available to you at any given time. So like, if your opponent is whittling away your graveyard with sacrificial, then you kill the sacrificial. Maybe you don't have all the mana values available. Might be a potential concern.
I mean, that's something you have to deal with for any graveyard hate effect, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think this one's a bit exacerbates the effect a little bit, just because it needs so many cards in your graveyard and needs like particular conditions. So if your opponent's really heads up about it, they can preemptively kind of thin out your graveyard.
But what if you like sack your fetch land or sack your Wayfish, right, and then play this in response?
Ooh, no, thinking with portals, and maybe also play your mill spell as well.
Yeah, and
Maybe
then
play Find maybe you leitmotif find happiness and misery, which causes you to lose a life, and then find happiness and misery goes graveyard. It also mills you too. Whoa. And then your studies class has flash, and whoa, you're going wild.
Wait, now that you mentioned leitmotif, find happiness and misery making you lose life, doesn't that apply for all of the other cards in this cycle too?
Yeah. The awkward thing is that find happiness and misery is a sorcery. So
yeah, but like you can like leitmotif this thing up and then figure out instant speed with some other random black spell.
Yeah, but that is kind of getting to 3-card combo. It's like, and this like cheap instant speed cards you think of like Exuent, and well, you don't really want to play Exuent and then a Wrath. There's a bit of awkwardness there. But, I mean, maybe you do. Maybe you play Exuent and then leitmotif resolves, and then you lose life, and then you Wrath, and then your Exuent resolves, which kills the last thing.
Yeah, like
maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
it only takes 5 mana to do that, right? Because you exit, the leitmotif comes back, and then you irate retribution for 2.
I think that was maybe getting a bit fanciful for analysis.
Okay, yeah, so like just do that thing, but with study past instead, and then like pick back up your exit and your find happiness and misery, and then you can do it again later.
But moving on, we have a pretty solid counter spell, Lost Through Dreams. White blue instant counter target spell. Sounds good to me. Has some other text. How relevant is that other text, Ricky?
Pretty relevant, because if you counter a non-creature spell, you basically lose a card draw, right? Like imagine you're playing against aggro deck, and wait, never mind. If you're playing against the aggro deck, they have mostly creatures. Imagine playing against a control deck, and then you're forced to Lost Through Dreams their Planeswalker, and then now you blank your next draw, and now you can't deal with their next thing.
Yeah, so fatigue is especially interesting here, because fatigue is like kind of like a reverse clue almost. Where it kind of locks your next draw step behind 2 mana instead of getting an additional draw. Maybe that's an interesting way to think of it.
Yeah.
There's of course ways to mitigate it. I mean, fetches, of course, go in most mana bases.
Oh, right. Fetches, you can shuffle all your fatigue with fetches. Wait, never mind. This card's great. I take back what I said.
Also, you can like ready for anything and scry away, and I mean, that is maybe getting it close into the realm of what we're talking about with like leitmotifing, find happiness and misery.
But I feel like it's way more possible, because I mean, I can easily imagine on turn 4 a control deck playing Lost Through Dreams and then end step ready for anything.
Yeah, and Emil, you can also do this on upkeep. So even if you go like turn 3 Lost Through Dreams, maybe you can go upkeep, ready for anything, scry away the fatigue, play a land, still have a counterspell up.
Yeah.
So there's like, you can definitely manage it, and definitely when ready for anything is brought up, it's one of them. Note that this is the King Dancer target, so helps get your King Dance count up, which is always nice.
Yeah, it's better than Portal Fracture in late game, because instead of your opponent paying the 2, you have to pay the 2. Except you can always pay the 2, and
it is always nice to have some amount of actual hard counters. That's what Reweave Reality was doing in like Blue-White Juyu. That is just a hard counter that if you get to late game, you have an answer to your opponent's expensive things. You don't need to rely on quenches, and this does fulfill that. Because even if you are just eating the fatigue and paying for your counterspell over 2 turns, it's not too bad.
Yeah, because Juyu has plenty of extra mana lying around.
Yeah, with like a Jenny +1s and whatnot.
And also Reweave got nerfed, so there's that.
Yeah. Additionally, it's probably worth noting that you don't need to play the fatigue right away. So if you are playing as aggro, and you do have to counter like Rigid Council or Seto-san or whatever, some non-creature, well, yeah, the fatigue's in your hand, but well, if you already have some answers in hand, then maybe you can delay playing that fatigue a couple turns until the mana isn't as bad to pay. You don't need to play the fatigue on turn 3. You can wait until turn 5 or 6, maybe, just relying on that initial interaction in your starting hand.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess creature decks is just free, right?
Yeah, the base case of a Essence Scatter is not too bad. And definitely some of the scarier cards in the format are creatures, like Infectious Ego being a card that basically every control deck wants at least a couple of good answers to. That's definitely part of the reason why I like playing like Quenches, is that they deal with Infectious Ego, where something like Cursory Glance doesn't.
Yeah, speaking of, so how many copies of this card are you going to put in Juyu pools?
I think I'd probably go 2 or 3 if I was building the deck again. Just straight up replace Reweave
Really?
Reality.
You're still on 4 Cosmic Sinkles, right?
Yeah. Maybe you could argue for this over Key Block, but I don't think this is a card you want all 4 copies of, except unless if you have like actively ways to get rid of the fatigue. And Juyu doesn't have that many ways to do it. Since Juyu, the card deck's named after Juyu, of course, is sorcery speed. So you can't get rid of the fatigue that easily.
Right.
Um,
But it's an extra card for Eye of Shijiro.
yes, I suppose that is true.
Like, it's better than a land in a late game if you have Eye of Shijiro active.
Yeah, true.
Like, worst case scenario, you can Lost with Dreams your own non-creature spell in order to get an extra Eye of Shijiro trigger.
That is definitely something that it is possible to do. Yes. But speaking of the white cards, we have Dance of Steel and Song, which is a pretty neat robots enchantress type thing. Enchantment creatures are definitely not very common, and this buffs those, but it also is an enchantment creature potentially.
If you want to expose your lord to creature removal.
Yeah, so kind of the maybe basic idea of this card might be that you have some random artifact flying around, sealed riftway or something. Then you rouse 1 on this and rouse 1 on the sealed riftway, so you get 2/2s, which is kind of neat.
Okay.
And then you also it's also lowered, and which is nice. Also just kind of an aggro in general. It's pretty darn reasonable to just put the rouse on a creature. So if it's that artifact creature, then you get +3/+3 on that. Maybe you're playing Clockwork Gaucho, which wants to have a whole bunch of +1/+1 counters on it. So you got turn 2 Gaucho, turn 3 Song of Sword and Steel, put 2 counters on Gaucho. Suddenly it's a 3/3. Then all your artifact creatures get +3/+3 from the Gaucho. And
how are you getting your artifacts creatures onto the board if you're going for that curve?
I mean, I guess the idea would be that you go turn 1, realign self-replication.
Okay, sure. I mean, that's always the ideal opening curve or opening hand for robots.
Yeah, and you can also turn your rail lines into creatures.
Right.
Which is kind of an interesting interaction.
Drive the train over your opponent.
Yeah, run your opponent over. Yeah, but definitely a very interesting card. Even though it's like relatively simple, rouse is just a pretty complex mechanic in general on this. I think highlights that a little bit.
Yeah.
So moving on to another god. This time without any set mechanics, we have Artie, Indecisive People. This card has a lot of text. +1 finds utility land, and then you sack a land. -2 is a
Boseiju.
Reconstruct, I think it's the
Reconstruct. It's a one in yeah, it's Reconstruct, but like Reconstruct's just strictly worse than Boseiju from canon, so
this does put the land in play untapped, interestingly, if that ever matters, which may it does.
I mean, it's target non-creature, right? So you can hit your own stuff and ramp.
Yeah. So and then the -6 is probably never relevant, but does do stuff.
So yeah, the main attraction is a +1, right?
Yeah, I think there's a good amount of things to find at the +1. A couple of the things that I mentioned are Prismatic Caverns, which is a Karoo, as well, particularly because the +1 untaps it, so that ramps you kind of, or at least rituals you or whatever.
It does sort of ramp you, I think, right? Because wait, never mind. You have to bounce. Yeah, you still have to bounce your land, so yeah, it doesn't ramp you.
Yeah, because you have to sack land and bounce land. But it does give you the 2 mana immediately, so that's nice. Prismatic Vault, Prismatic Vault does ramp you, gives you the Moxen, because you can sacrifice the vault immediately. I believe you do that you cannot use the mana from the vault unless if you already have it in play.
Yeah, because you don't get priority between putting a land, untapping a land, and sacking it. So it's basically +1 ramp a land, I guess.
And then of course it does finds all the normal utility lands, your Mia Gates, your all of the Zidinas, your Nurebas, all that good stuff. And then having Reconstruct on the -2 is pretty good utility.
You mean Boseiju on the -2, right?
Sure, whichever effect you want to call it.
And something else you can do is fetch Crumbling Vestige, which is probably better than fetching bounce land because at least the less lands going into your hand. Because I only like bouncing lands in case you play a bunch of tap lands.
Yeah, if you're like particularly concerned about not having untapped lands to bounce, Karus are definitely not as good. But I think in general, Karus are better than Crumbling Vestige. Because Karus are even though constructed is a fair bit faster, so the card advantage Karus generate aren't as large, or isn't as important rather. Karus are still pretty good cards.
Yeah.
Let's see. But yeah, I think this is just generally pretty solid. It comes down to into Rapid Dork. Has a lot of nice utility. Even though it doesn't like quite help you directly win the game, which is generally something you want a 3-drop to do. Just the fact that it like does so much kind of nice stuff is pretty nice. It pretty makes the card pretty easy to appreciate.
Yeah. Worst case scenario, you can -2 itself in order to ramp you by 1, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Can definitely do that. Might be a good use case in some games. Moving on, we have a pretty basic card in Competent Amateur, or Competent Amateur.
Yeah.
Main reason I'm mentioning this card is that it attacks as a 2-mana 4/3 on turn 3.
Is it? Oh, right. Combat.
Yep. Also has some nice utility with like counter-based decks. Just generally a pretty solid card, but it's very vanilla, so vanillas have pretty hard time making into constructed. But maybe this has enough interactions with +1/+1 counters and being able to animate stuff that it's worth considering.
Also has really good flavor text.
Oh, yeah. Here's Wanda's Call. Next card is much less vanilla. We have Dayang, Aspiring Muse. And this, what's this effect even called?
Wheel. Actually, it's Winds of Change, right?
Does Wind of Change only affect you?
No, I'm pretty sure Winds of Change only affects you.
No, Wind of Change is both players.
Oh, it does?
Each players.
Huh. Okay, yeah, it's Winds of Change then.
Also, Winds of Change shuffles.
Close enough.
Okay. But yeah, this discards a lot of cards and draws a lot of cards. So it fills your yard incredibly fast.
Well, the first thing I thought of when I saw this card is Celestial Serpent and Sphinx's Authority.
Yeah, so Celestial Serpent was fortunately changed recently to be one or more. So it doesn't quite go as hard as you might like it to.
Aw. You only get to draw 1 card off this thing? Off Celestial?
But it does work with Sphinx's Authority. You can manage to get it to survive to your opponent's end step and have both in play. It also works with all the dredge cards, so like Illuminating Firebird and Cecil Stalker is a nice kind of synergy because you turn to Dayang. How do you pronounce it? Dayang?
I don't know.
Discard your hand, draw that, and that reanimates Firebird, and then Cecil Stalker comes in your opponent's end step because the next end step is kind of awkward on the colors. White is generally not a great graveyard-based color, but maybe it's worth going out of your way for.
I mean, Dredge Cats was just black-red, right? So it can easily splash a 3rd color.
Yeah, maybe. But at the same time, there is you are definitely taking up the cost in adding a 3rd color for only 1 card. Maybe Dayang is worth it. It does also kind of remind me of Fire's Dice and just how efficiently it fills up the graveyard and loots. So maybe that's your additional white splash where you get in 3rd colors for Fire's Dice.
Yeah. Actually, can you play this card in the Road to Awe deck that Hersey was running? No, you can't because it's not the right colors.
Yeah, I believe that deck is everything but white, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, I mean, maybe you can go your way for it. Maybe it's just good enough that you can drop another color entirely and play it.
I mean, just drop blue, right? Or drop green, because what do you need green for in Road to Awe?
Muck Bruiser.
Oh, just drop Muck Bruiser. Like you don't need Muck Bruiser anymore. You're a combo deck now.
I mean, that does make you does take away game plan, which is worthwhile, maybe not. Also probably worth mentioning that the card has like a pretty decent amount of just general utility. I mean, 2/2 lifelink has at least some utility into like burn and aggro.
Yeah.
And it does have that deal 2 damage if the player's empty-handed, which is also affected by lifelink. So just kind of nice upsides that maybe come up if you are just kind of duking out in the late game, trying to get every point of value. Those are definitely things that are nice for a kind of core archetype card to have.
Well, actually, Small Luxuries, that combos pretty well with Diane, right?
Yep, definitely that will get you an additional card every turn, yeah. There's also a Duneborn Eternal Duneborn, which does similar.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you do need to find a way to win the game. That's definitely something a lot of graveyard decks struggle with, is actually winning the game, where they can generate all these values, but all this value, but then your opponent has a way to do a ceaseless stalker, and then you're like, oh, I can't win because all my cards don't actually do anything. They just draw more cards. Move on to another Dang card is Dang's Displeasure, which is the first of these I guess the second, because we saw Stir the Pot.
Well, this is
But
still the
basically-
first because it's the four-mold one.
Yeah, so 3 colors, you get to choose 2 or 4, but if you choose all 4, then you have to get it to Fatigue. So this is pretty reminiscent of Far Away, which I was always a fan of. I always liked how Far Away played, and this is much better than Far Away.
So it's 3 mana. It's a 3 mana 2-for-1 that also bounces something.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about this card is that I think it's actually pretty hard to get both the sack modes to be good. It's actually not that many decks that both the sack modes are good against.
Oxbox?
Yeah, Oxbox kind of, but at the same time, like you're counting a Starfield Woodgate for 3 mana.
No,
Right.
you bounce the guy that's suited up, and you make them sack their. Oh right, you make them sack a token, and then they also sack their.
It's not bad, but there's
yeah.
when that's like the example you go to, you'd hope that's like something a bit more like prominent.
What about
like, wow, really blows you out?
What about ramp? Like you make them sack their Problem Resurgence and their Petal Scatterer, and you
Or
bounce.
you make them sack the Pronouncer token and the Adjudicator.
But you get to bounce the token first.
Yeah, so then you just deal with the Pronouncer. So they sack the Pronouncer.
Yeah, and then you have to sack the Educate. So now you're like back to square one in terms of ramp.
Yeah, so you just pay 3 mana to counter Pronouncer Preserves, and you got a Fatigue. I'm not saying it's bad, because obviously that's a particularly good answer to this card, but you'd hope. But I think it just kind of shows a lot of that actually trying to imagine this would be good against. Do you have ways to like make it not as quite as good?
Yeah, because a lot of decks in MSEM just make random non-creature tokens all the time. That's why that's part of why Kara is so good, because sometimes cards randomly cost 2 mana against the mana deck.
Yeah, and like Weeping Lotus is another example, one of those cards where it's like, okay, well, you can't make them sack the Lotus because it's going to make a petal. That being said, I think there's actually a reasonable case that this card is just playable if it was Disperse plus Excellent.
So Far and Away, basically.
Yeah, Far and Away, but 3 mana instead of 5. I think Far only hit creatures too, so on the upside there. Just because there's so much utility on that card. Especially at instant speed, where Disperse is actually just kind of a good card equally. This is probably why Crest is just randomly shows up and is just like always good. Because Disperse just always has utility between bouncing opponents' things and bouncing your own things.
And I mean, this thing can also be a Far and Away for non-creature permanents too. So if your opponent has like a random token and Planeswalker, this still gets them.
Yeah, absolutely. You can definitely blow out people with this. And I guess I should make the specification that I think Far and Away was an actual edict. This is Innocent Blood. Excellent.
Oh,
whatever.
Wait, each player. I didn't know this.
Each player.
Okay, never mind then. You can't play this in Juyu pools anymore.
I mean, well, maybe you can. I mean, your access Juyus aren't that important, and you have Weeping Lotus.
Do you really want to pay 4 mana for this thing? Like that's what happens if you try to sack Lotus Petals for it.
Well, and I mean, like you can bounce your Juyu and make both players sack a creature.
Oh yeah, you can bounce your own things. Good. Yeah, that's actually right. So you can just bounce your own guy and then actually edict your opponent that way.
Well, and yeah, it technically hits your Cane Dancer, but you can bounce your Cane Dancer before.
Right, and you can like replay your Cane Dancer. Yeah, this thing's great.
But yeah, there's a lot going on with the card. I think it's just generally the baseline's really high, even if I don't think this is going to blow out your opponent as much as you might expect on first blush. But I think just the baseline is pretty darn good as with just how much Disperse and Excellent do.
Yeah.
Moving on, we have Counting Clouds, which is roughly speaking Star Jump, but instead of being Fact or Fiction, you count card types instead.
It's Concord. It's the Concord version of Star Jump.
Yeah. So you split piles based on card types, but you split the piles kind of. But I think most of what I want to say about this card is that it works with all the same things as Star Jump. So Thunder Roads, obviously, what's the dragon?
Long.
Yeah, Zhulong works very well with Zhulong because it does free cast. And yeah, oh yeah, but you free cast the thing, and then the thing that free cast is also copied. Wait, hold on, you copied the counting clouds because of Zhulong, and then the free cast also gets copied. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you just win because you've cast 2 copied spells.
Yeah, that's the hope at least. I think there's a fair amount of deck building considerations around this to make it better than Star Jump. But
I mean, like, how many cards you have to get off this thing before you're happy?
I think 3 probably.
Okay, so like land, instant, and then your choice of creature, sorcery, or artifact, or enchantment. I mean, that's planeswalker. I mean, that's not that hard, right?
Yeah, I think generally, even without too much effort, it's probably about the same as Star Jump, which is like always like marginally playable.
You can high roll, you can low roll. I mean,
It does kind of have the same Star Jump thing where you really don't want to hit a bunch of lands. But maybe it's not as bad here than as in Star Jump's case.
yeah, because this thing abounds instead of casting from the pile.
Also, in general, this is probably a bit easier to resolve in Star Jump because you don't need to have your opponent think really hard about the like fact or fiction piles.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't encourage as much slow play.
So moving on to another fatigue, choose 2 or 4 card. We have Prove Worthy, which gains a lot of life.
I've had this play against me. It didn't do that much, but that was because I was playing ramp.
Yeah, so this kind of as a base case is like more or less a solo player if you're just choosing to.
You mean Lightning Helix?
Whichever you want to.
I mean, it's red and white, right? So it's like it's more of a Lightning Helix for 3 mana with black than a Solar Flare.
I mean, if we want to get into the details, we can talk about that Escalate card. What's that Escalate card called that has the gain 3 life mode?
I remember, but I forgot.
A Wicked Blow.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is just a Wicked Blow on the baseline. It's just generally pretty good. I mean, if you choose all the modes, it's a gain 6. Really good at dealing with planeswalkers with high loyalties because you can deal 6 to them. Nice if you want burn. I mean, we've been mentioning that a couple times that modal decks tend to burn their opponents out. This is modal.
If you're playing against burn, then you're also pretty happy because you kill one of their things and you gain 6 life.
It's also kind of nice that can be countered. That occasion comes up. I think it's like a tempo deck that's playing some spell piercers or sinkles or something. You can make sure that this is going to resolve.
Yeah.
Also works very well with Hatsor's maneuver, since this does big damage. You get a big amount of tokens if you apply Hatsors onto it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you conjure a fatigue, which I guess we already talked about, like we can do with fatigues.
Yeah, the typical things with fatigue apply.
Although since you're not in blue, it's harder to get the thing off the top of your deck at instant speed.
Yeah, definitely. Though again, you have, I guess, Blade Motif doesn't work here, right? And Happiness and Misery because it
yeah, the order doesn't
is
work
cast
out
beforehand. But moving on, we have Coerced Tutelage, which I think this is an effect that feels like it should be constructed playable, but I think this actually does a lot secretly. Because I mean, not to like talk about like Blue Green Ramp too much, but this does a lot against Blue Green Ramp, for example. Because of course it knocks off all the land auras because you can exile the land.
Oh right, it hits lands.
It hits all the creatures have ETBs, for example.
Yeah, so you grab their Leyran Alpha, and then you swing at them with their Leyran Alpha.
How does this work with Primal Resurgence?
You get to enchant your thing, I think, and then control goes back, but then it's still stuck on your land.
Yeah, and Primal Resurgence is one of enchanted land stuff from its control that adds green. So you steal the Primal Resurgence. It's funny. You get the Leyran triggers and whatnot. It might admittedly be more funny than anything. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's like a decent amount of decks that just like hate playing against this. Maybe with a sideboard slot. Maybe you're playing Fireweaver. This is your potentially cool option.
You're playing Temur Fireweaver?
I'm sure why not? 5-color Fireweaver, maybe. Yeah, just potentially a cool Silver Bullet to fetch against particular decks. Moving on, we have Theocratic Dues, which is a Wrath.
An actual Wrath, not a sweeper.
What is a sweeper?
A sweeper is a Wrath that does damage instead of killing everything directly. So things can still survive if they're big enough.
But a Wrath sweeps the board.
Yes.
A Wrath does like infinite damage to each creature. So I think this is cool. Incidental grave hate is always nice. This also deals with some random things like persist, for example, and other things that are kind of nasty in that way.
It also it hits your own yard, so you have to play in a deck that doesn't care about its graveyard.
Yeah, that's a good point. Abzan does have a lot of nice things to do in the graveyard too. Those are kind of the default graveyard colors almost.
Yeah, and also it forces you into Abzan, so like yeah.
There's also a good amount of other good RAS. I mean, Rot, everyone sung the praises of Rot at one point or another. Singularity's Grasp, Afterlife Takes Its Due, Violent Collapse, Wave Decay, and we just earlier saw Irate Retribution is another option.
Those guys aren't Wrath, they're sweepers.
Oh yeah, sure. So there's a lot of other options for RAS or sweepers that fulfill similar deck building space, which might make it hard to play this card.
I still think Bureaucratic Dudes is easier to cast in Abzan decks than those double pipped or triple pipped Wrath.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, generally speaking, I think an Abzan your base black for like turn 1 discard and whatnot, but and like you don't really want to be playing Dwarks in a deck with a Wrath. So there's more emphasis to be base black rather than base green, and being base white. There's not really a ton of reason to be base white in Abzan.
Yeah. If you're playing stuff like Twisted Masterwork, this thing lets you shuffle back your Twisted Masterwork targets.
Ooh, fancy. That's a pretty nice interaction, which maybe comes up sometimes, maybe.
Yeah.
Moving on, we have Esoteric Herbology, which does a lot. I don't know if it's necessarily like better than Dang's Especial or Proof-worthy, but all these effects are good, even if they don't have like necessarily a ton of cohesion in like where they go in your deck. Because like a tutor, a mill spell, and a life gain spell are very distinct, even though the life gain does interact with the mill in a nice way. There's a bit of questioning what deck wants all these.
I mean, it has to be a Sultai deck because it's in 3 colors, so that limits you immediately.
Yeah.
Is Sultai control a thing?
You can definitely do it, yeah. At the same time, how much do you want this in a control deck?
It gains life. I mean, play some Muck Bruisers, you know, this thing does grow your Muck Bruiser by a lot.
Like a Muck Bruiser base control deck?
Yeah, like Pressure, right? Sultai Pressure, that's a thing.
Yeah, but I don't really consider Pressure control deck.
Like, control Pressure.
I mean, I guess.
Like this thing just turns on Pressure by itself.
Yeah, I suppose so. But it's still kind of a bit on the awkward side. I guess maybe just the baseline of a tutor is good enough.
There's probably there's probably a decent tutor target that you can grab and then take advantage of the milled cards right away.
Maybe. I mean, it doesn't free cast it, which unlike Conjure Realities say, because this does compete with Conjure a fair bit. You're looking for a tutor. Does fetch more than Conjure does, but the free cast is pretty nice.
Well, the Conjure doesn't help you stay alive.
Well, I mean, the free cast could.
It could, but it might not.
That's his boot, it does. Fetch stand unassailable.
Are you really going to Conjure for stand unassailable?
I mean, just I think making 3 mana is like, how much life is this gaining you on average? Like 4 or 5?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, 4 or 5.
And like even against aggro deck, would you really prefer like 4 or 5 life over 3 mana?
No, but like late in the game, yeah, never mind. I can't argue for this.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a case where like maybe there is a deck that really wants a mill. Maybe play some mill, right? Each player mill 7 cards.
Oh, right. That could also be a downside.
Yeah, I think I guess on baseline is probably a downside, but maybe if you made this Sultai mill, maybe use this to fetch Speed of Darkness.
Sure.
So it turns into like a mill 14, and then you gain a bunch of life. So like you've been playing Oracle's Visions and whatnot, so maybe that's gain life is like a gain 8 or 9. That gets you another turn, and then you play Speed of Darkness, and then the mill is like a mill 14 plus your graveyard, so you kill them. It is a fair bit higher quality than a lot of the other mill cards you'd be playing. So
yeah, and since you're a mill, you can just mill your fatigues. You're playing the crab, maybe. Right? So like the crab mills on upkeep, right?
I think holding crab is only opponents. Oh, yes, each opponent.
Okay, never mind. You just have to play on 5 mana and mill yourself afterwards, I guess.
Yeah, play a Oracle's Vision, maybe. Moving on, we have the academies, which are at the very least interesting. I don't know if they're good. The colorless lands, much in the same vein of like Tron, where they when they're together, they provide some effects.
Yeah, except the difference here is that Tron's actually good.
Okay, well, yeah, Tron is really good. All these bad though.
So Soaring Observatory, you tap 3 different newly named academy to control at 3 mana. Yeah, it doesn't even give you extra mana.
Yeah, but it mana fixes. They play 5-color Tron.
Okay, so instead of trying to get a mana base that lets you play 5 colors, you instead play mana base that forces you to search up 3 specific lands so you can play your colors.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, okay, how about Whirling Repository? Just gives you 3 mana, draw a card.
Don't we already have something similar on a land? Like Nareba's 6 mana draw a card, right? So like this is half a Nareba. So like
well, 6. Nareba's 7 because 6 plus tap, draw 2. But like 7's really hard to get to.
Okay, so then
maybe you can go like Whirling Repository, like you play your counter spell and then you pay your 3 with a repository to draw a card.
You have to pay 3 every turn to draw.
Yeah, but you draw a card every turn.
Yeah, but like, what else are you doing with your mana?
I don't know, stuff.
And then Alchemical Reserve, it's a single +1/+1 counter.
Yeah, you get a discount
only at the sorcery.
No, but you get a discount on your Monument Acquaintance. Well, think about it this way: you play mono white control.
Okay.
With Embodied Soul, and then you put the count on Embodied Soul, which gives it +2/+2.
Holy crap!
Because of how Embodied Soul works.
Good. So you're playing 3 colorless lands in your, or you're playing like 12 colorless lands in your mono white control deck.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any land tutors in the format? Is Silver Scrying in the format?
I believe so. Yes.
Is this worth going out of your way to use Silver Scrying for?
Well, there's an Academy tutor in the set.
Is it any good?
I believe it's a Rampant Growth.
Wait, what's it called?
Wander Opetia. Search your library for a force to Academy card, put in the battlefield, tap, then shuffle.
Rampant Growths are bad.
Yeah, but this fetches you an Academy. Well, maybe you can play like Gated Realms and stuff if you want.
Sure.
Okay, well, granted, this all maybe falls apart a little bit because Mirrorgate exists, and Mirrorgate makes you very sad.
Right. Well, no, if Mirrorgate comes down, now your academies can actually tap for colored mana. So, like, it reduces the need for Soaring Observatory.
Oh, crazy. Now you've learned to see the silver lining in things. But yeah, I think, for the most part, maybe you can, I think probably the 5-color Academy deck is probably a bit of a meme, but I don't think Whirling Repository is that bad. Just like manage to draw a card is just pretty good. If you can set it up. Granted, setting up it's pretty hard too, so.
Yeah.
And moving on to our last card, we have Distilled Inspiration, which is kind of like Old Confirm, kind of.
What do you mean?
Where you play your 2-drop ramp spell that draws you a card, then you play 4-drop.
Sure. It's not instant speed, and it's not cane dancerable.
Well, okay, like maybe not super Old Confirm, but like, I mean, and additionally, being on effect does give us some matter upside, so you can flicker it and stuff.
Yeah.
So basically, the idea is that you play this on turn 2, you name Infectious Ego, draw a card.
Okay, and then turn 3,
you play Infectious Ego.
Well, no. Turn 2, you play this name Infectious Ego, make your opponent super concerned, and then turn 3, you reveal that you don't have Infectious Ego.
And then they go, whoa, thank God.
And then the next turn you play Infectious Ego because you top decked it.
So this has some, like, this is a bit novel. Like, does work for activate abilities. Then creature with activate abilities, like the gods from Pancho. This works nicely with. If you can consistently find multiples of the same card. So I think the intention here is that this name's Fatigue, at least in set.
Right. That totally makes sense.
Then that also works. Maybe you can play multiple Infectious Egos. Maybe you name something that flickers this. So maybe you ramp into Ico, then Ico +1's on this. Maybe that's interesting.
Yeah, and then you rename something on its way down.
And like mentioning the Pancho gods, there's this is pretty good with Nuomorang, because you play this turn 2, name Nuomorang. Turn 3, you tap this for Nuomorang, and it comes down, and you can sacrifice it to Nuomorang, which is nice.
Yeah,
maybe
but then
something interesting.
How do you pay for the god mode if you're sacking this?
Well, with your lands.
Okay.
This ramps you to 4, so you use this to pay for new Moang, and then you use your third land to pay for the Demigod, maybe.
Okay.
There's some like nuance. There's some like use case here at least, even if maybe it's a bit like maybe it's not doesn't actually end up being worth putting in your deck. I think if you did put in your deck, it wouldn't be too bad.
Yeah.
But maybe you just can't find the slots for it. A lot of cards like this kind of end up going that way. But that is the end of our set review
Well,
of ACA.
Actually, I want to give a shout out to Academy Assessor for causing a bunch of rules headaches, because this thing disrupts the process of casting a spell.
Yeah. Roughly speaking, my understanding of those rules at least was don't try to do the same thing over and over again when your opponent tells you can't do that. Yeah, just basically don't try to do the same thing again and again. Because this card does weird things with, say, escalate, because it makes the spell cost less. So you can try and cast a spell for like larger than you can actually pay for with escalate, and then hope your opponent like strikes out one of the modes so you can pay for it. But then if they don't do that, then you can't pay for it.
So then you rewind. So like, yeah, this thing's going to murky rules territory where your opponent gets to make a decision on the casting process of a spell before the step where you can't rewind anymore.
Largely speaking, it's not. I don't think it's super relevant. It's more like an edge case kind of thing. Looks my understanding, but and this card isn't terribly playable. I mean, it does some neat things with the choose 2 or 4 cards, so you can just strike out the fatigue mode that you yourself cast. But
yeah, and if your opponent's playing a modal deck, then it probably does something. Actually, how does it interact with the modal artifacts?
I believe the modal artifacts would be choosing the modes, right? So it should work fine. So it should like counter Nexus possibilities, kind of.
But only if your opponent decides to choose more than one mode.
Yeah. So maybe you don't choose 2 modes if you have Nexus out, so then they can't use this. Yeah.
Yeah.
But pretty neat set. I don't think there's necessarily that many staples coming out of here. A lot of kind of minorly interesting cards that maybe show up in like particular archetypes, but I don't think there's anything that's like, oh yeah, you just slam this in every deck. You can. Maybe Audios, potentially a card like that. Irate Retribution maybe ends up being really good.
I feel like Artie needs specific deck building in order to actually make good, so it's not really a generalist card.
I mean, and maybe stuff like Prove-Worthy or Dang's Displeasure kind of invites new control type of archetypes in different colors than you normally see.
Yeah. But otherwise, I think we've already said everything that we wanted to say, unless there's some unless you want to give your thoughts on the set, just last words.
So it looks pretty solid. I think a lot of cool cards.
Yeah, I agree.
It was fun to review.
I agree.